Sorry about that. Took me a little while to get going. Hello, everyone. Welcome on this 27th day of August, 2026. My name is Luke Thomas. Welcome to episode 316. Austin 316, John 316, a lot of 316. It is the 316th episode of my live chat. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. Sorry, it took me a second to get going. It's been a busy day, but here I am, ready to rock. We got a lot to get to today. Well, I don't know if a lot's the word. No, it's not true, actually. There's a fair amount of smaller things going on for sure. First of all, we've got UFC Shanghai on Saturday. We've got no PFL. There's a one event, by the way, that no one's paying attention to, and I looked up the names on it, and I don't know if I saw one that I recognized. Well, no pun intended. That was kind of nuts. But we got the Bella Mir upset, which I think there's a lot of interesting conversation about. So a lot to get to. Thumbs up if you haven't. Subscribe if you haven't. The way this works is I put up a thread yesterday on the posts section here at youtube.com/Luke Thomas. You guys fill it up. I'll go for about an hour on those. And then we'll get to the paid questions where there's two ways you can do that. One, you can just put in a donation into the super chat. I really appreciate that when you do. It makes a big difference. So thank you very much to all those who do that. Or you can become a member. What do you get with the membership? Well, you get these membership videos that I'm putting up. I've been much more active about it recently. I've been trying to be good about it. Those don't go anywhere else. They only live here on this channel. They could be about anything MMA, but plenty of other things as well. And you can put in a donate. Sorry, you can contribute to the paid portion without having to pay. Just tag Othello if you have some kind of issue. Okay. All right. Without further ado, let's get this party started, shall we? Okay, all right. I had to drive through downtown, even through downtown DC, basically today to run some errands. Not all, but a lot of the shit from that IndyCar race is still up everywhere. I should say big swaths of downtown avenues are still kind of blocked off. I was able to go all the way through off 9th Street, all the way down. But Jesus, that thing was a heavy lift for the people who had to set it up and clearly to take it down. Usually they're pretty good about getting that shit out of here. There's a lot. All right. Without further ado, let's go. Let's get this party started, as I mentioned. All right. Okay. Can y'all see? Yes. Luke, is it wrong for me to think that this fight versus Movsar is Volk's to lose? That's an interesting question. Okay, yes, Movsar's undefeated, but he wins largely based on wrestling, obviously. And yes, as you've mentioned many times, Islam did win 4 out of 5 rounds in the first fight with Volk. But Volk's takedown defense was respectable, that's true, and he made Islam work, also true. I personally feel a lot of Islam's success in certain positions was largely based on him being able to use his size, him being the bigger man, to supplement his skill. It wasn't just skill, technique alone that gave him success. I would agree. And given Movsar is a former bantamweight, I just feel he won't have the same strength size advantages Islam had versus Volk, and will therefore have to rely solely on his grappling skill alone. And I don't know that that will be enough, to say nothing of the gap in the stand-up skills Volk will have over him. Am I overlooking something in your opinion? It's a great first question. I love it. First of all, I'm very excited about that fight. I know a lot of people might not be, but your boy is. I think that's a pretty good it's the same thing with the Islam Gary fight, where am I expecting a barn burner necessarily? No, I would not say that I am. However, the importance of it and the strategic questions about it, to me, are highly interesting and a real, in the words of the great Brian Campbell, a real technical thriller in my mind. I saw an interview that Volk did. I mean, I saw the video yesterday. I don't know when the interview was recorded, but it's still relatively recently because he's talking about having to face Movsar. And in the video, he says, "Look, man, I got news for you." He basically admitted, can I stop every single takedown? He's not necessarily saying as much, but what he is saying very clearly is, he goes, "This is not going to be a stand-up fight." Because, what Movsar did in his last contest where he decided to slug it out for long periods of it, still won. But, remember that? He was against Murphy, he was just electing to have multiple rounds go where he wasn't even attempting a takedown, right? What he said was, we're going to strike it out, but not because Movsar is going to do that. We're going to strike it out because I'm going to make him. Okay. And again, what he basically said was he might get a takedown. Like he can't, like Volk can't guarantee that won't happen. But what he didn't use the word guarantee. But what he basically implied was what's going to happen is I'm going to get up. And I'm going to get up, relatively quickly or quickly enough where that takedown and then the subsequent control that comes with it is not going to define the fight. It's not going to define the round. And it's not really going to do much for him. I'm going to make him strike it out with me. First of all, let me just say, I fucking love the attitude. I love the outright confidence in saying, like, it's a recognition, like, can you stop every single portion of Movsar's grappling game? Probably not. That seems a little, that would almost be like comical confidence, right? Like outrageous, outlandish confidence. I mean, maybe he'll do it, but to go out there and, just not give your opponent any kind of shred of respect or understanding of what you're up against, that would be maybe a mistake. But to have the confidence to know and to believe and to say that you're going to make him strike, that's exactly the thing I wanted to hear. And the thing that he's been saying as well on top of that is that, yeah, listen, my takedown defense was one thing versus Islam, which, by the way, to your point, was not by any stretch of the imagination bad. It actually was quite good, even though I thought he lost fairly. But what he's arguing now is that it's just much better, that like the intricate, different little mini positions through the entire chain, he understands them much, much better now. What's your assignment here? What do you have to watch out for here? What's the ladder that you're climbing? So the metaphorical ladder that you're climbing, how does all of this work? His argument is like relative to the Islam, the first, obviously not the second, but the first Islam fight, it's just way more advanced than it once was. I'm inclined to believe him. He has never struck me as a guy whose confidence didn't match his ability. Right? I mean, how many times have you seen an MMA? And it's not a glitch. Like you need MMA fighters who are confident. And you might be saying, well, yeah, every MMA fighter is confident. Yeah, but how much of their confidence can you say very closely matches their performance? Yeah, I mean, a lot of fighters very early are like, yeah, I'm going to fuck this guy up and I'm going to fuck that guy up. And, they may win, they may lose, but it doesn't exactly match the rhetoric. His does. His does, or by and large anyway. It fucking does. Now, obviously, he got way over his skis in the second Islam fight, but he has said as much after the fact. Volk's a really interesting guy for me because Volk threads the needle better than a lot of these guys in understanding the difference between confidence based on just having done the fucking homework and like a false kind of confidence you assert to just tell yourself. And the latter can be important too, especially in times of doubt. But his is different. His is rooted in something. His is rooted in ability. My belief is that I think Volk should win too. Your question was, is it his fight to lose? One of these situations where unless you make some kind of a boneheaded error or, if you just do your game, you'll win. I mean, obviously we won't know until they fight. I don't think maybe I personally wouldn't go as far as Volk's to lose. But what I think I would say is I don't think that that's an unfair assumption at this juncture. Again, maybe Volk goes in there and just gets run over, right? I mean, I don't expect that to happen, but one never knows. In which case, this will all look silly. But I think that he is strong for his size. He is still at an advanced age, pretty quick. Not as quick as he once was, but still pretty quick. His timing is insane. Obviously, dude, his P's and Q's in terms of footwork, cage positioning, they're excellent. Like some of the best that divisions has frankly ever seen. So, there's a lot of reason for optimism. There's a lot of reason for optimism. I like Volk's chances. I think saying personally, I think saying it's his to lose, a little on the strong side, but not outside the realm of rational assessment. No. Let's see. Luke, hope all is well. Hoping you can clarify your political position on Ukraine. I don't know if I've ever clarified it because I don't know that I've thought enough about it. I can't find much, and what I did find was a statement against sanctions on Russia. I assume this is a general principle you have for any nation. Basically, yes. You also praise shows like Breaking Points, which I would say has spread a lot of pro-Russia Apologia. I can substantiate this. Would be happy to email if requested. I'd be lying if I said it didn't slightly bother me, considering your general humanitarian stances. Right now, we are seeing civilians targeted by drones. 140K dead. UN believes it is likely much higher in occupied regions. I'm sure that it is. Thousands of children kidnapped and countless other war crimes. It's a great question. I'll just be candid with you. This is not an issue I have spent an enormous amount of time studying. The sanctions on the Russians that I bemoaned when they initially were going on was not because I have some great fondness for the Russian government or Vladimir Putin, excuse me, in particular. It was only because the depth of it would cause a lot of harm to the average Russian, not so much the oligarchs that can circumvent these things. And sanctions in general, sort of like is a function of the dollarized economy more broadly, and the ability to use instrumentation to just, I mean, it's like, for example, with Iran, it's like you don't have to love the government to know that they've kind of found a way to survive despite the sanctions, and that the people who have suffered the most are the average people who just live there. And so the whole idea of sanctions is to cause enough misery to the average person such that it foments pain within the country that leads to political change. And that's just proven to not really be true. It just causes great immiseration without the kind of ingredients for regime change that the pro-sanction crowd tends to view it as such. Obviously, when the invasion happened of Russia, it was shocking to me. When they took Crimea, it was fucking shocking to me. And now we're at a place where I don't know what, I'll just be honest, I don't really know what the right answer is, to be honest with you, because we're in this position now where we're funding this battlefield where on the one hand you have, there's this sort of tension, right, between like how much was NATO. One argument would be, like the John Mearsheimer, that the European powers engaged in a series of acts that put Russia on its heels such that it, I don't know if incentivized is the right word, but it led to an outcome where this tragedy happened. I don't know that I fully ascribe to that, but I certainly recognize some of the evidentiary merits of it. And then on the other hand, I mean, look at the humanitarian cost on either side. They're having to pull, like the amount of death that is happening. Certainly to your point, I mean, Ukraine has been absolutely devastated. I think that they've lost well over like 50% of the people who live there since the war started, just in terms of people leaving and whatnot. It's been an absolute horror show. I don't know what the path is to ameliorate this situation. I've not studied it. I've not read about what would be what's a reasonable path to get out of the current place that we're in. I recognize fully the amount of harm that's been caused to ordinary Ukrainians and, again, the state itself. I also recognize that, I mean, there's just so much absolute horror to it. I will be absolutely honest with you. On my political coverage, you don't see me talk about it a lot because I don't have fully formed ideas around it. All of these things require really concerted study and really concerted reading and just really concerted focus. And my focus has been, as you can just see by my coverage, on issues much more domestic in general, things like immigration, things like the economy, tariffs, although obviously tariffs is international in some sense, obviously, But I mean, how it affects the domestic political scene. I do focus on Colombia a little bit and their election because obviously that is more of an area of focus. So you haven't seen me speak much about it. I can see the horrors that the average Ukrainian can articulate, or just even a reasonable observer, like, look at how fucking horrible this is. But I don't know what the present solution would be, and I don't know how we extricate ourselves from this. And it's a gigantic problem, but it's not one I've read a lot about. It's not one I've studied a great deal, and it's not one I have strong opinions about in certain ways by virtue of that. And I know that's probably not an answer that most folks want to hear, but I just think you have to be careful about your coverage. Like, you can't just talk about everything. You kind of have to have some sense of focus, and you can see by my coverage what my areas of focus have been. I'm much more focused on, for example, the United States' relationship to Israel, and all of these things can be to an extent connected, certainly. But that's my answer. I don't have a great one because it's not a thing that I've spent a lot of time studying. Someone says, "Rest in peace, Optimus Prime." The guy who did the voice of Optimus Prime died. He was also the voice of Eeyore. I forget his name. I don't know. I'm not going to front and pretend like I knew his name, but I did retweet because I saw that the guy who did it died. I think that guy's got a hell of a fucking set of pipes, man. Sad. Luke, is there a fight that two friends refuse to have that you wish you would have been able to see? For me, it would have been Khabib versus Islam, Merab versus Aljo, and Dustin versus Prime Masvidal, let's say at 170. Are there any others you'd add, and how do you think the ones I mentioned would have played out? I'll be honest, I'm not huge into the friend versus friend thing, with some exception. The Dutch kickboxing scene doesn't seem to be as bothered by teammates fighting and or friends / acquaintances fighting. There seems to be more of a more permissive attitude on those kinds of bouts, whereas in MMA, there's a little bit more taboo. I don't know if it's the word, or what do you want to say? Expectation that it not happen. The big one from before all of y'all's time, unless you've been around as long as I have, the big one that got away was Fitch versus Koscheck. It was John Fitch versus Josh Koscheck. They were both at AKA at the same time, and they both were kind of, remember, Koscheck got 2 cracks at St. Pierre, Fitch got another, and St. Pierre beat them all, and every single time. And then obviously in the second Koscheck fight, he broke his face, and it was a whole thing. That was the big one. That was the one that one was powering news cycles over and over and over again for many, many years. And it wasn't until both of them basically just stopped fighting that it went away. I mean, I think Koscheck stopped fighting first, and then Fitch sometime a little bit after that. And then, the conversation obviously at that point kind of stopped. I'm not that big on them. I saw that PFL World Series of Fighting fight between, who was the Carlos Fodor? It's not Fedor. It's Fodor. Jesus, Fodor. Carlos Fodor. He fought the guy. It's his brother, but I think it's more. What was that? Was it his relational brother or was it a step brother? One of the two. It was, for lack of a better description, let's say they considered one another family, and they may have had like a similar dad, not a different mom. I forget exactly the nature of it, but dude, like watching them fight was kind of fucked up, and it apparently messed one of them up, not in terms of like the damage from the fight, but the psychological scar. And I realize that's a little bit different because, again, on some level, you're dealing with a familial relationship, it's not a friend that you may have met later in life or something, but it was so, dude, it was weird. It felt weird. It felt off. I didn't enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, my attitude is, if you find a set of fighters, male or female, who have teammates that, organically, they're kind of cool with it and it just plays out, then cool. Like, I don't really have a problem with that. But like when you get the ones that are resistant to it and then they get pressured, I don't really dig that. I'm not pining for that. And the other part too, and answering these questions about like how it would go, it's very hard to know actually, because when you get something like that, like a Merab and an Aljo, or especially a Khabib and Islam, they know the inside and outside of one another's game really well. Now, Carlos Fodor, I'll pull up his resume. Who was the fuck? He was the guy who was dressing up as a superhero. You may remember this, maybe before your time. I don't know. I forgot he was called the Future. That's funny. Who was it? It was who was it? Who was this motherfucker? Was it Ben? Yeah, it was Ben Fodor. Who was Phoenix Jones was the name that he went by. And again, they might be actual full-on brothers. There might be some kind of dispute there. I'm not exactly sure where it stands. But suffice to say, it made me feel real weird and I hated it. Yeah. Here we go. Even though you have said a million times to not do this very thing, watching your content for so long inspired me to pursue journalism, albeit in a very different field. So thanks for helping me find something besides MMA that I'm passionate about. Even though my bank account is empty, it brings me a lot of joy. Well, Can't say I didn't warn you. Can't say I did not warn you. Well, I hope it works out for you. I truly mean that. I hope it works out for you. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you're able to meaningfully contribute. But it's a tough road, brother. It's a tough road. So I wish you nothing but the best of luck, and I appreciate all the support over the years. And perhaps you'll do much better than I did, in which case you don't have to worry about the things I've had to worry about, If Islam is able to beat both Prochas and Morales next, do you prefer to see Islam fight Shavkat or test himself at 85? I don't want to see him fight at 85 at all. I know you've said you don't like the chances versus Strickland, but would you be more interested at least by seeing the attempted history? No, not at all. No, less than zero interest. No, nothing. Not at all. I think there's a debate to be had. Are we not overvaluing the like going up in weight, right? So you dominate a weight class or whatever, and then you go to the next one. I don't mean to suggest that there's no value in that. I think it's the very definition of pound for pound. And as I've said, if Islam goes in there and beats Prochas next and Morales next, and if it was the last one, Rakhmonov, I in my opinion, that would make him maybe the best that's ever done it. And I would probably say at that point, the best that's ever done it. If he's able to go in there and really, especially if he schools him, which will be very difficult, but let's just say that he does for the sake of argument. I would be very, very impressed by something like that. But I will tell you that I don't think that even if he wins, maybe with Prochas because of the wrestling differential, but even then, I don't really know. I want to make a point. I don't think I'm overvaluing the difficulty of that challenge. But one lesson, one idea that's lingering in my mind is, are we overvaluing it to such a degree that we're actually ruining the product or damaging it or hurting it or minimizing it? Or maybe whatever the right word is. And what I mean by that is, in an era of fighters where they're competing all the time and they're competing, they're real offensive dynamos. And let's say like it's in boxing and you're moving up maybe just 7 pounds. And I realize some of the better ones have moved up much more than that and even had some success, like putting guys away late or higher in weight. But the point I'm trying to make is, I think, a lot of times these guys go up in weight, and unless it's like a Jones versus the corpse of Stipe Miocic, it's a really difficult climb. Like, everyone is doing a lot of think pieces on how good Islam is and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, guys, he's fucking awesome. But, you're going up a way, like, especially against a very defensively talented guy in Gary, it's going to be harder for them to do stuff. And not just that, it's like, because it's harder, they're going to be able to do less stuff. And I also think that it's going to make them slightly more risk averse in certain situations, which you saw in like the JDM fight. In other words, are we like creating a cult of moving up in weight in such a way that we're actually giving ourselves less dominant champions in weight classes as a consequence, and making MMA a little bit more boring than it otherwise should or would be? Could you make the argument that an Islam versus Topuria fight would be less exciting than Islam versus JDM or Islam versus Gary? I wouldn't make that argument. I don't think the evidence would hold up on that. And you might be able to say, well, look at Penn. Penn went up in weight and he beat Hughes the first time. That's true. And he would have beat him the second time if he wasn't injured. But the St. Pierre thing is kind of with the rubber at the road. Although the first one of those fights, which was a 3-round fight, was pretty good. But in general, I think a lot of this pressure to go up, I understand it. I get it, but I'm not sure it makes the MMA we could be getting otherwise with those fighters more fun MMA. And that's not a reason to not go up in weight, but it's just something I want us to all begin to think about. Like, maybe there is something to the idea. Maybe. Again, I'm not like hardcore asserting this. This is an idea like ruminating in my head. But like maybe there is something to the idea that like the way we built legends previously was because for the most part, dude, they just stayed in one weight class and they had, they were their best weight. They were able to do their best work. They had a bit more of an open style. They didn't have to play a more of a reserved kind of get to the finish line game as often, certainly. Again, there's going to be counters to that too. Like late St. Pierre was a lot of that, although that was also burnout. But like think about like Jones having a long campaign at 205 and Silva at 85 and St. Pierre at 170 and Mighty Mouse at 125, like staying in your weight class and then just fighting on all of these guys who come up. Maybe that makes better MMA. And when I say better MMA, I don't mean like, Demetrius would be high level if he's fighting at 25 or 35. St. Pierre is going to be high level whether he's fighting at 70 or 85. But I am beginning to wonder if there's a pressure on pushing these guys out the door of their weight class to get to the next one. And then the enjoyment of MMA tends to suffer a little bit as a consequence. I don't know exactly how true that is because I've not really fully measured it, but it is an idea kind of circulating in my head. It's a long question. Let's see if I can simplify it. Okay. I asked about UFC BJJ on MK and I have a few follow-ups. How long do you think TKO will keep this going? I can't imagine overhead is too high, but clearly it's not generating interest like they expected or hoped. It really all depends on their goals. If they're trying to put people out of business, it'll go on for a little while longer. If they're not, then they might fold sooner than you think. But I have a feeling what they want to do is just take it over. Do you think TKO will make a move to acquire RAF as an attempt to save face in the grappling world? I wouldn't put it past them. It's become apparent that RAF has a much bigger foothold within the MMA combat sports fan space. And do you think this could motivate TKO to start a kickboxing or 4-ounce Muay Thai organization? No. P.S. I'm starting an official petition for you to stop referring to UFC numbered events as numbered events and instead call them integer events to stir the pot. Oh, by the way, I'm the donk that got the bone marrow transplant. I'm now 100 days post-transplant, which is a huge milestone. I finally get to start coming off of medicines, and I'm going to return to training with a non-contact boxing class on Monday. Hopefully BJJ and MMA training will be shortly thereafter. Well, I'm very glad to hear that. Yeah, UFC BJJ is not exactly tearing up. It's like, what kind of impact is it having? A fairly minimal one. But they might just be waiting people out, and they might just be saying, we'll just wait. We'll just wait until, we can put everyone else out of business or enough of them, we can buy them out and then we'll just have this space. I don't know what their long-term plan with it is. I think that part is a little harder to tell. And it's not clear. I don't know what their vision is. I mean, that's the hard part. Like, Contender Series has a clear purpose, and that's changed somewhat over time. But even a cynical version, you can see what the purpose is. Road to UFC, similar kind of thing, right? Tough. You can see I don't know what they see UFC BJJ as, other than a way to like punish Craig Jones or I don't get it. I don't know what their plan is, and without that, I don't know. The thing about RAF is RAF to me still has a lot of stuff to figure out because they're both this play. I mean, they started out as being like, oh, we'll have a place like, yeah, UFC fighters can come and wrestle here, but also, we're going to have Kyle Snyder versus, big name wrestlers from Russia who he's got, long-standing rivalry with or something along those lines. But those things don't really catch fire. What catches fire is the MMA fighters, doing stuff. And that has led them with Armin and then Dylan Dennis and whatnot to kind of have a little bit of a Misfits vibe to it. And I realized, Colby wrestled collegiately and Armin's a very talented wrestler, but you get my point. Like, so in other words, if TKO bought it, would they keep that vibe? Would they change the vibe? If they changed it, would it change the product and the audience relationship to it? There's a lot about like, could TKO do it? Sure. If they've got all the money in the fucking world, they could do whatever they want. But like, if they did, look at, I mean, just look at how much, like, who would want TKO to buy RAF? Like, what they're going to do to it. They're going to turn it into the same thing they're turning all of their properties into that they can. Again, UFC BJJ hasn't been able to develop for them to be able to do this, but the goal is to just value extract it. It's just value extract it. Is that what y'all want from RAF? This is the thing I keep saying to people, like the NFL. It's like, oh, the NFL, we're going to have a show in Brazil. We're going to have a show in Australia. We're going to have, we're going to London 2-3 times a year, whatever it ends up being. And we went to Spain. And it's like, can I be honest with y'all? I don't need everything to be a global property. Like, oh, we want to put El Clasico in Miami. Don't. Leave it in Spain. It's where it belongs. Like, if you want to go watch that, go watch that. There is so much being done today to just kind of scale, and create as much content as possible and just turn everything into a content factory and then sell the rights and then, just pump out just fucking constant content rather than saying we're going to take a slightly more minimalist approach, or at least minimalist relative to this. And yeah, we want to make a bunch of money and we want to be a big deal, but we're not going to just extend the product for the sake of extending it. Like the NFL fucking prints money. They don't need to go to Spain or Brazil or any of these other places to make a shit ton of money. And yet they still want to. Why? Just so the league can be bigger and we can fuck up the game in the process. And now they want to add another game and have 18 fucking games in the regular season. Like, I know they got rid of the Pro Bowl, which whatever, but you know what I mean? Like, why can't things be smaller and more curated, and they don't have this big profile and it doesn't have a global footprint? Okay, it doesn't have a global footprint. Who gives a fuck? Sumo, like, can you imagine like looking at sumo and being like, what we got to do? We got to make that a global thing. No, it's fucking Japanese. And of course that can bleed into other countries. And I know people have come over to Japan who are not Japanese and they become Yokozuna. Great, cool. It's got a way to cross-pollinate no matter what. That's fine. But I'm of the belief that like there's so much happening where people take something that's beautiful and good and enjoyable, and they say to themselves, how do we expand and financialize this to the point where the joy you felt and the thing that you had in it, and this is not just sports, it could be a lot of things, and the joy you feel to this doesn't feel like that anymore. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of that. Okay, if 170 didn't have Prime, Colby, or Usman at the top, do you think Khabib would have moved up prior to retiring? Say if Woodley was still champion after Khabib beat Dustin. I feel like stylistically, Islam somewhat benefits from going to a 170 division that isn't very grapple heavy at the top. Take nothing away from him, but I do think he benefits from that. If there were guys naturally bigger than him, not sequential, who could also grapple at his level, I don't know how eager he would have been to move up. Say if Shavkat were champ instead of JDM, for example. Yeah, it's a good question. Although because of the weight difference, you can see it's still very difficult to get those guys down. Yeah, probably he would have. Probably. I mean, Usman also, as a guy that they had trained with and that he liked, pardon me. But yeah, I mean, I think well, it's not just that, right? Because he was waiting for Islam to have his shot. So, of course, you could do that by moving to 70. But the point being is there's a few factors involved there. I think what I would say is that, yeah, he probably would have. I mean, hard to know for sure. It's a better question for him. But, yeah, he probably would have. Luke, I just got a BODOG DVD. Holy shit. And the original Smashing Machine DVD from 2002. I'm curious if you have any cool MMA memorabilia from over the years. Man, I've got all of the press material that I had that they handed out at the Kimbo Slice James Thompson fight. That's some weird shit I got like that. Bellator under, I think it was Rebney. Maybe my own bobblehead without even me asking. You can see here, see that green outline here and the other one here. It's a Kimbo Slice, and I forget what the other bobblehead is that they gave me. I have the original WEC glove. What else do I have? Mostly I just have stuff that I accumulated on the road, but I've got a bunch of old Pride DVDs. I've got old magazines. Like, you guys don't remember Fight Magazine. I have old UFC magazines. Because that was a thing, UFC magazine. But it was more just sort of the things that I had seen in my journey. The very first MMA event, pro MMA event, in DC was in May of 2007. I called that fight, told the story a million times. I've got all the stuff from that. I've got a signed boxing glove from Lamont Peterson ahead of the Amir Khan fight because that was here. So things that have been part of my journey, things that have been part of my experience. I've got some cool stuff. I don't know that I've got like objectively awesome shit. I could show it to anybody and they would find as much charm as I do. But I've saved all of my credentials. I've got a whole bag full of them. So stuff like that. What the fuck is this? Why are we ignoring the BlackPink questions? Who the fuck is that? Who is your bias? Who the fuck is this? All right, now I gotta search it. Is this if this is porn, I'm gonna be fucking bitter. For fuck's sake. What is this, some K-pop band? BlackPink is the South Korean girl group formed by YG Entertainment. The group is composed of 4 members: Jisoo, Jennie, Rose, and Lisa. Brother, I don't care if they live or die. The Merab Islam exchanges about nationality are very strange. Merab is from a nation that enjoys UN-recognized sovereignty, something that Dagestan, Chechnya, and Ingushetia don't enjoy as official Russian republics. It took 20% of Chechen population being killed in the wars of the 90s and early 2000s and turncoats like Kadyrov to subjugate the population and his father. Don't forget that. Dagestan complete subjugation and absorption was concluded decades prior. This all goes back to the very early days of Imperial Russia's campaigns into Caucasus region. Merab probing this area is very inflammatory, especially as a lone gunman that targeted ethnically, Russian Chechen war veterans stationed in Dagestan had been seen training at Khabib's gym. Yeah, there are within Russia, even now, even with the Soviet Union dissolving, there are obviously still a lot of subgroups that I think would probably argue that they deserve nationality within, again, even modern Russia. The ones you've identified, probably chief among them, Chechnya in particular, and that inflaming these tensions is not great. The one problem that I think you're always going to have is that, not that I am trying to say, oh, it's great that Merab is in, or I haven't even heard what Merab has said, but to the extent that what you're telling me is accurate, let's just assume that it is. The problem that you got to always remember in this game is that, dude, fighting is about identity. You don't want it to turn toxic, although sometimes it can't be avoided, unfortunately. But like I've said this before, dude, what's the greatest rivalry in terms of like identity group in boxing? I mean, there's probably a few answers you could give, but I would argue it's Puerto Rico versus Mexico, right? And it's because, these are very similar groups in many ways, right? They share a common language. They share, a lot of similar cultural elements, although there's many differences, obviously, too. They share a religion, in general, obviously. So there's already some commonality between them, although they're very different people in a lot of important respects. But it's the clash of identity. Like fighting speaks to a certain kind of level of. It's so funny, right? Because MMA is so right wing, and all those people are like, we hate identity politics. I'm like, yeah, but you love identity sports. It's kind of what fighting is. It doesn't always have to be that way. You'll find people from one country and they don't make it about that. That's true. Like, it's not that way every time, of course. But like underneath all of that, like some of the very biggest fights have been this, and it doesn't have to be nationality per se. It can be other contours of identity, but it goes into it. Jack Johnson isn't just remembered for being a great heavyweight champion because he beat a lot of guys. It's because of the racial undertones, frankly, the fucking overtones, to be quite honest with you, that go into his rise in his career and ultimately what happened to him. So like, you just can't get away from that completely. I agree with you that like, I'm not sure exactly what you're referencing, But like, if he's doing that, I would prefer that they not. I would prefer that they not. But I just want folks to understand you should kind of always have, there are ways for identity and even like the conflict of identity to sometimes actually just beautifully raise an event. I mean, what do you think the Olympics are? Right? I mean, you can have these different identities and it lifts the whole thing, or the World Cup or whatever. But in fight sports, it can lift it or it can sink it. And it's a thin fucking line between them. And so just kind of always keep that in mind. What do we want to do here? Okay, I'll get to this one because it's got a bunch more likes. Let's do this one. Is there something to be said about how the UFC machine promotes prospects too quickly? Bella Mir has only fought 5 times over the span of 6 years, won a national title in wrestling earlier this year, and also spends plenty of time competing in BJJ. Regardless of what you think of her potential, she hasn't earned enough time to develop or focus on MMA. Yeah. So I put up a members-only video on this. Not so much about do they promote them too quickly, but the answer is yes, they can. They're doing it more often than they used to. When I say used to, I mean quite a while ago. I mean, back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, they did this less. But now they're doing it more. Back when guys would lose 3 times and then they would just be done with them, they didn't do this hardly ever. Very, very rarely. So you understand, like MMA had this like weird moment where UFC wasn't the solidified actor, and guys were coming and going, and it just was weird. Like you could have people with 30 fights, people with 5 fights. It was just kind of this hodgepodge mix of early MMA, and then that kind of developed into a more regular system of weight classes, and then that got improved. And then at the end of that, they're not really allowing this kind of thing, and then the product expands, and then they began to do more of this. A Sage Northcutt would be an example of this. I would even also say a Paige Van Zandt to an extent is an example of this. Even if they might have had numerically more fights than Bella Mir, neither of them appeared to be really ready for like true UFC level. And then they tried to raise them up inside the UFC. And I just feel like UFC at its best is really not for that. It's not to say it can't happen. It's not to say it can't be done, but it's not like the UFC. If you really believe, like what the UFC excels at is not developing fighters. They've developed a few for sure, but it's not more than a few, but it's not really what they excel at or what makes their product special. What makes it special is, in theory anyway, the very best fighting the very best. And I realize that there's a lot of counters to that, but that's what to me lifts their product, right? It's what separates them from the other ones. Like Bellator having AJ McKee and taking him from his first fight to being a champion all within one organization. Bellator was well suited for that because Bellator's product had a bit of a ability to flirt at the high end at times, the very best of Patricio or the very Pitbull or the very best of, something like that. But they had so much just fucking basura on their roster, and they had so many basura events that it was very easy to get the exact kind of treatment that you needed for whatever stage you were in. Much, much simpler. With UFC, there's still less so these days, which is why they can kind of play around with it. But at least historically speaking, it was more premium fights. So you had to be premium ready. And now they're expanding that. So you get like the Raul Rosas Juniors and, whoever else is, you might want to Bella Mir or whatever. Although obviously Raul's done a lot better, but relative to her. But in general, like they've kind of gone in this direction because they're scaling the product. There's just the premium end of the sport is finite. It's finite. It's very, very small, right? Top 10, top 5 across these weight classes. That's really it. That's the premium end. There's not a whole lot you can do to expand that, except to scale down, in which case now you're beginning to affect product integrity. And then the ability for the organization to properly curate someone to keenly see where they're at and what kind of matchmaking makes sense for the exact moment that they're in. It's very, very difficult for them. And, you know, they're looking to, dude, I mean, I think the other part too is like, you know, women's MMA, you know, I'm not going to say it's on life support exactly, but it's not like it's like killing the game right now. And so they're looking for people who can just jolt that shit loose. You know, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody who can come in here and be special. And that was not her, not on that night. Now, maybe it'd be foolish to write her off, and I'm not going to do that. But yeah, she did not look ready at all for prime time, did she? And the interesting part to me, and I mentioned this in my members only video, which is that I've said to you guys, like, I don't know what the future of women's MMA is like, but I'm not really ready to slam the door shut on it because of the growth of Scholastic Wrestling, the girls' programs in in uh, in high school and college. And I don't know how many of them are going to get over to MMA and which ones are going to break through, but it at least is worth seeing that process maybe play out, like what actually happens. But the interesting thing that has now happened, and this is the big problem, is defensive wrestling. The best practices around defensive wrestling have destroyed the elite college wrestler to MMA model. Because the way it used to work is that you could take someone who was an elite college wrestler, right? Let's take a Matt Hughes, perfect example. You could take a Matt Hughes, two-time All-American, D1. You can get him into MMA. He has some fights on the regional scene. He gets to UFC. His striking is not ready to go by any stretch of the imagination, and it will take years, if ever, it gets good enough. But what you can do is his wrestling is going to be immediately impactful. You know, yes, he can still lose, bad things can happen, but he can take that skill set right away. Right away, he can use it. He can win fights with it. You got to matchmake him. You know, he can't be like completely insane like the Japanese were in the Pride days and just throw guys to the wolves. But, you know, it's useful. You can win at that level. And then, in theory, this happened a lot. You would raise them up. And then by the time, you know, they have to really strike it out with someone because they're also really good at wrestling, they've had time to work on their striking. But that doesn't work anymore. Like, you got a fucking national champion, dude, and she ruggled trying to get Alex Apodaca to the mat. And even when she did, she couldn't do really fuck all with it. Like, because the best practices on defensive wrestling and anti-grappling have gotten pretty fucking good. Like, defense in the not so much in the striking department, although that's gotten better too, but in the wrestling departments, like anti-grappling, anti-wrestling, nullifying it is caught up. It's caught up to the game. There's been a huge catching up process that has happened on that particular front. And so now, hey, we got this D1 dynamo. They've got 4 fights on the regional scene. We can put them in Contender Series. We can start them off small, get them 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fights, and then begin to level them up. That shit doesn't work nearly as well as it used to. Because look at what happened. The best practices on defensive wrestling have made that wrestler to high-level success in UFC pipeline a lot more complicated. And then you add in the scaling of the product where you now have to find more younger fighters who are underdeveloped. It creates a lot of challenges. There's a lot of them that were just left like a few minutes ago. I'm trying to find the ones that were around for a little while. Okay. Many of the same what-if matchups get brought up a lot. Silva GSP, Lesnar Fedor. But this week reminded me of one really big miss. Frank Mir versus Fabricio Verdum. How would you assess this matchup? Where in their parallel timelines do you feel each would have had a leg up, pun intended? Obviously excluding when Mir broke his shit. Prime versus Prime, the version of Mir fought X versus the version of Verdum fought Y. Also, who had the better career overall? There's a gigantic difference between them, which is that a big portion of you, this is kind of crazy if you missed it. People never talk about it anymore because he overcame it, but his career got really fucked up for a while because of the motorcycle accident. I'm going to say it one more time. I think it was 2004. Mir has a motorcycle accident and breaks his fucking femur. Okay. And he wasn't right for years. Baby girl, I'm working. I don't have it, chica. Mi amor? No sé. All right. So he just lost a big portion of his career. Also, Verdum was a little bit different. Like, obviously, Mir was known as like a submission guy, but Mir, and he wrestled in high school. I think he was a state champ in Nevada, but striking kind of came to him a little bit later, which is true for Fabricio. But Fabricio had an expressly high level grappling background. He was a world champion in the gi in jiu-jitsu and was a world champion outside of the gi in jiu-jitsu. They have a common opponent, which was Nog, and they both beat Nog, and I would say that the Mir submission was more vicious, but I think Verdum had a much easier time with him. I think Verdum would have beaten him. Verdum at his best is in some ways the best heavyweight I've ever seen. I know that's kind of crazy to say, but his submission prowess at heavyweight, I'm trying to think who comes close to it. I don't think anybody does. I think he's probably the best submission heavyweight artist I've ever seen. And he was huge for the weight class, or at least, well, properly sized. Mir was too. But I felt like his striking was much more forward. He wasn't trying to outslick as much as he was just a bit of a Charles Oliveira, I've got violence in every kind of scenario sort of striking style. He was a little bit more wide open, which made him a little bit more hittable. Even in the Antonio Silva fight, he kind of had to fight out of deficits in ways that was, not that great. So like and again, like running Stipe Miocic down along the fence line like he did, like a fucking idiot, and then just getting chinned for it. That was not great. But for Verdum, he could strike with you. He had very good takedown defense, but even if he didn't want to use it, if he was off, dude, you don't hear me say this very often, but one of the worst places you could have been was Verdum's guard. Not a great place to be for a heavyweight. Ask Cain Velasquez. You know what I mean? I think head-to-head Verdum is better. Yeah. I don't know what the fuck this question is. All right. I like this question, so I'm going to do this one. There's a bunch of ones that have been added at the last minute, and I try to not give those. Not that I'm trying to avoid those per se, but they have like one thumbs up, which you can give to yourself. I try to get the ones that have got a few more. Luke, advice, if any, what advice, if any, would you give to someone who's in their early 20s and not sure of where they want to live, work, etc.? Brother. If you are unsure of what to do, then to me, it sounds like there's just some living that needs to happen so that you can figure it out. And maybe I don't mean like ordinary living, like, oh, just keep doing more of what you're doing. In fact, what I would say is shaking it up seems in order. Now, I'm not trying to ask you to take on, take out a huge business loan and then, ruin your credit. I'm not, blow all your money, the business fails. And I'm not telling you to do something purely risky for risk's sake. But the best advice I can give you is if you're at a place where, like, especially if you're young and you're looking around and you're saying to yourself, I don't really know what I want to do and where I want to live, it's because you haven't seen enough of life to make those answers clear. If you live enough of life, most of that gets answered. Do you like living in cities? Do you not? Do you like working in an office, or do you like working with your hands? Are you good at one type of skill or another? Do you like how this place provides a social circle, or another one provides a different kind for a different reason? Do you have a desire to live abroad or at home? The more you're able to actually try things and live a life, the more these things become very easy to answer. And again, there can always be difficulty about this. I don't mean to say that it becomes simple for everybody every single time. But if you're at this stage, man, like, I just don't really know who I am and what I want to do and where I want to live. My advice to you, man, is that tells me you've got some living to do. You need to go somewhere and have some adventure. Truly, I mean that. Especially you got no kids. Go find adventure. You will find out who you are through that. Or at a bare minimum, you'll get a lot closer to finding out who you are by doing that. I can't give you a frame of reference. I don't know you. But if someone is like, I just don't know. I don't know where they want to live, work, etc. You need adventure. You need adventure. Okay. Here's a good one. My son has been doing BJJ off and on for a year, but our gym recently started offering MMA/striking classes for his age range. He wants to do that now instead of BJJ, but I'm very concerned about CTE. So do I have a moral obligation to not let him do those classes? How would you handle this with a child of yours? Yeah, I mean, this is easy. This is easy. You should look at the program. You should observe it, especially for this age, and talk to the coaches and see what safeguards are in place for striking to the head. Because if I have an 8-year-old, fuck, dude. I mean, forget about being 8. I mean, they don't need to be doing any kind of head contact for years. And they're allowing head contact like nope, not gonna happen. Nope. I would never let my daughter do that, period. Oh, but what about this? When she turns 18 or whatever and she wants to make different choices with her life, she can do that. But under no fucking circumstances at age 8 am I allowing my daughter to take punches of any kind to the fucking head. I'm not allowing my daughter to do that at fucking 16, much less fucking 8. Like, there is all kinds of self-defense they can get that, and again, I understand, like, you can get people who box coming up and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't think boxing is good for you. You can do boxing and get real good at it, and you can make a lot of money if you're Shakur Stevenson, if you're, somebody like that. But just an average person just trying to get good at martial arts because they like martial arts, get the fuck out of here. The head trauma is just not worth it. Did you all see that headline that came out about, Schefter got it totally wrong. They studied, I think it was like 200 plus brains of NFL athletes who had died. And the headline that came out from Schefter was that, hey, just a quarter of them had CTE. No, it was well over 90%. Now, there was a quarter that had a much higher threshold of what they were, like a different, there was like a graduated state of what they were, where it got much, 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 much worse. But how many had CTE? Almost 100%. I drive by when I have to go downtown, I have to pass the school that's got a football field. And I see these little kids who must be like, 10 or less playing tackle football. And listen, parenting is hard. Tradition is important. And I understand for some of these guys, they're going to be able to they're not going to play football forever. It's a great way to build, camaraderie and meet other people and just be a part of a community and have a lot of fun. They'll look back on it fondly. I'm not saying in every case there's no place for it, but like, you're gonna get, if you play American football, you're gonna get brain damage. You're gonna get it. If you box, you're gonna get brain damage. And especially if you're not very good at it. No. The only people who should be getting head trauma because they're practicing their striking are people who can make real big money off of it. That's it. There's a bunch of these. I got one. Oh, here's a good question. Wow, that's a good question. Jesus. Was Bella Mir's performance in the wrestling department the worst wrestling you've ever seen from an NCAA champ? That is a good question. Wow. It might be. Hold on. Let's see. So here are the NCAA champions. This is a partial list. You have Bo Nickel, Brock Lesnar, Mark Coleman, Kevin Randleman, Ben Askren, Johnny Hendricks, Phil Davis, Jake Rochalt. Jake Rochalt had some tough runs. Mark Munoz, Bubba Jenkins, Phil Davis would be another one. I don't know if it's the single worst performance. I'd have to think about that, but it's one A, it's on the short list. And then B, it might be. Now, the big difference between Bella Mir's situation and all of these are these guys, with the exception of like Nickel, for example, but the vast majority of them came at a time, even with a guy like Ben Askren, came at a time where the best practices were not nearly as good. And also, there's a lot of heavyweights here: Coleman, Lesnar, Randleman. And Rochalt and Hendricks were team takedown Bubbas. Oklahoma State, but then team takedown afterwards. It might be. Like, I'm not even trying to like dunk or be like shitty. It might be. Let's see. Oh, good question. If you were still working for CBS right now, how would they have changed? Wait, what? If you were still working for CBS right now, with how they've changed politically, would it cause you to leave with Bari Weiss, et cetera, making their news in arm of the Trump admin? I don't know to what extent that ever really affected the sports side. I will tell you that when I was there, this was never, I mean, obviously this was before Bari Weiss ever got there. But you know, at that time, they were fine. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, my understanding is what Bari Weiss is up to has no real role in the sports side. Now that doesn't, but like obviously, you know, the other problem is like it's twofold. One, you're owned by the fucking Ellisons. Like you can't really get that far out of line. Who would you look at in that stable that's like communicating views in all of CBS Sports? I mean, who's communicating views that are hostile to oligarchy or the Ellisons or to Trump? I don't know that there's any, to be honest with you, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I could be wrong. I mean, I can't think of one off the top of my head, certainly. So there were none of these pressures when I was there. I mean, clearly I would have been a bad fit. It really wouldn't have worked. You know, there were talks at the end of my deal about extending certain parts of what I was doing. Like, for example, it fizzled at the finish line, which is for good. It wouldn't have worked anyway, for scheduling reasons. But they were some talks about keeping me on to do HQ, and it didn't work because, as I explained to them, like I have to go live on my YouTube channel. What they wanted me to do was at the end of the fights, go live with them and not on my YouTube channel. And like that, the timing on that is weird because sometimes, well, college football's on. Oh, you can't go live, and I'm like, well, I don't work for you full time anymore. Like my YouTube channel is now the way I make money. I can't allow myself to I can't give away this. This is like the most lucrative window. And so the whole thing fizzled. And so, but let's imagine that there weren't those complications. Maybe they would have kept me on for HQ or something, but like, you know, I would have been a bad fit. I would have been a very bad fit. It really wouldn't have worked. It's quite unfortunate, you know, when I got into sports, not that people were necessarily oh, I'm going to express every political opinion I possibly have. But like, if you did, it wasn't considered nearly as taboo as it is now, or especially if you're speaking out against forces related to ownership. But that's just all completely changed. You know, they've really clipped the balls off of sports generally, like everywhere. They've clipped the balls off of it. Like, you know, Pat McAfee being like, I'm an outsider. Motherfucker, you cupped the balls of power. Like, I don't have any comment about his. Same with Hassan Piker. Like, I don't watch his show. I don't watch Pat McAfee. I'm not saying they're equivalent. I'm just pointing out, like, I don't watch their show enough to have commentary about the show. But like, trying to present yourself as an outsider when Ari Emanuel is your fucking agent, it's like, brother, maybe your audience is dumb and they believe that, but the rest of us fucking don't. Like, you're not an outsider, you know. And that's what I mean. Like, you know, trying to be, I'm gonna be an outsider. It's like, dog, your agent is Ari. You're the insiderist of insiders. You know what I mean? All right. Let's now get to the paid portion. But before we do that, y'all know, donks, about what I'm going to say here. Y'all know what time it is. Yes, indeed. Perfect Gene time. Our friends at the Perfect Gene, you know, I've told you guys this. They're with us long term. I love this partner. I'm wearing it right now. Their jeans actually fit me, which is rare for a big donk like me. But I got to tell you, they're comfortable and they look great. The Perfect Gene has basically just nailed the formula. They have the look and the feel of what you understand to be jeans, but this time they move with you. They stretch where you need them to stretch, and they don't feel stiff or restrictive. And honestly, they're the most comfortable jeans I've ever freaking owned. And the pitch is simple, donks. They look great. They fit great. You're going to feel great. And by the way, your significant other is going to love them. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to get the Perfect Gene for 15% off with the code LukeLive15, LUKELIVE15, and you're going to get that at theperfectgene.nyc/LukeLive15, theperfectgene.nyc/LukeLive15. Use the code LukeLive15 for 15% off. Check the link in the description and the pinned comment and go get yourself a pair. Trust me on this one. Give me 1 second and I'll be right back. Give me 1 second. All right. Let's do this. Mario, welcome to the party. Oriole. Recently watched the movie about David Foster Wallace, so now I'm tempted to read Infinite Jest. Have you read it? No. My very best friend in the world has been telling me about Infinite Jest since I met him, and I've not read it. I need to. There's a bunch of shit I need to read I've never read. He was big into that one, and then Confederacy of Dunces. JT, welcome to the party. Galassi, welcome to the party. I think I'm saying that right. Dirty, whatever the fuck, welcome to the party. You mentioned before that you lost respect for certain journalists after, let me get a drink of my thing, Conor Max 2 fight week for avoiding his controversies. Was one of them Oscar Willis? It's a good question. Appreciate the donation. What I would ask is, I try to be as forthright and as candid as I can with these chats. If I have criticisms of people I've had a long-standing relationship with, I'm going to make those to them directly. Unless something really went sour or something. I don't know. Maybe there'd be a way I do it publicly, but I'm going to say that the only thing I would say with this is, with some exception, beyond me, how about this? It is getting increasingly difficult, not impossible, but it has become vastly more difficult to provide MMA coverage at any outlet without having to compromise oneself industry-wide. I'm trying to think if that's true across sports. I don't know enough about sports, but generally, but within MMA itself and combat sports itself, it's becoming significantly more. Everything is basically becoming some version of PR. And I think it's a problem that is only going to get worse. Aussie Strike, welcome to the party. Johnny says, I've been golfing for years and felt I wasn't progressing, then finally broke through. Have you experienced this in any have you experienced this in any aspect of life, brother? This is how everything works. I'm shocked someone of your demographic doesn't golf, old and washed. I have tried golfing. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and quarrel with people who golf. You know, I like to go to the driving range. I've mentioned that a million times. The one at East Potomac Golf Course that Trump is going to fuck up. They have a driving range. You know, you can get a club and a bucket of balls for how much is a bucket of balls to at the driving range? Let's see, at East Potomac driving range, East Potomac. Let's see, how much is that? Do they have? They have lessons and shit. I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but it's like dirt cheap, and you can bring a beer with you and stuff. Like, it's fucking great, you know. But in terms of like, dude, who has time to go do this shit? Like, oh, I'm going to go play 18 holes. Motherfucker, I got bills and a family. Luke, I've been watching you, mate, since your job on Sirius XM, MMA Beat and so forth. Hope that's the proper grammar. Not quite. It's not like Sirius XM. It's SIRIUS. It's an invented word. Thoughts on Jennifer Mir? I mean, I certainly don't condone the comments that she made about Apodaca at the times at which she made it. It's not great. It's not great to be antagonizing your daughter's opponent in that particular way, and then trash talking them and whatnot. But like, you know, welcome to youth sports. I feel like this is a common thing that's just happening. Not celebrated fighters' mom gets in there on Instagram per se, but like parents being involved in the antagonistic elements of competitive sports. And I think in general, it makes things worse. Dana, for all the dumb haters who still don't get it, if you took the amount we've paid fighters and stacked it up in, well, he didn't say this, and stacked it up in cents, it would reach higher than MGM Grand plus 3 Stephen Struves. I just can't. We're going to talk about this on MK tomorrow. I cannot, like, I cannot. I guess I can't. I talked about it last week. I guess I can kind of believe it. I can kind of believe it that we're at a place now where like UFC can just be like, hey, look at this big number. It's a big number, isn't it? And everyone's like, he's right. That's a big number. That's a fucking big number. Been like, and then he just goes, fighter pay. You know, like, and then donks are just like, well, case closed. Big number. Big number. Large integer. And then it's like we can do math. We can, I mean, and also accepting anything he says at face. I'm not saying once again, it was so funny to me when I was doing all of these interviews related to the UFC White House card, and people would be like, yeah, but Dana White says this. And I'd be like, and? So I'm not telling you he's lying. I don't know if he's lying, but why are you telling me that you've accepted what he says at face value like I'm supposed to care? Luke, do you ever wonder that BC's departure from MK may have been puppeteered? Yes. By those wishing to maintain control over the MMA narrative, seeing as MK is a popular and has seen continued growth? Yes. I don't know that for a fact. I mean, I think, here's what I think. I think in general, BC earned a spot. And, you know, to me, it's no surprise that they wanted to sign him. And it's no surprise that whatever they ask him to do, he does it well. Like none of that is an accident. I've asked other people on MK, you know, do you think that, you know, because they could have just let him keep doing this. MK was a Paramount property for 3 years. Everyone's like, it was a Showtime property. Well, not totally. When I signed my deal with Paramount, remember that this was back in what, 2020 or 2021, whatever that was. For that, it was a 3-year deal I signed with them. during that 3 years, it was a joint property. It was a Showtime property and it was CBS Sports / Paramount property. It was their property. Like, so to me, I don't quite understand why, that couldn't have been maintained, but they wanted him fully in-house. And so on some level, I suppose, did they do it to undercut the show? There's no way to know. I have no possible way of knowing. I have no emails to this effect. I have nothing to this effect. I know that what the UFC wants plays an extremely heavy role in, who does and doesn't get to work at Paramount, and what they will allow and what they won't allow. And because I suspect that I'm not well liked within the UFC offices, it's hard for me to completely rule out. I guess maybe it's a better way to put it. It's hard for me to rule that out. Do I have affirmative evidence to that effect? I do not. I have none. But this is just my personal opinion. I've actually never said this to BC. I don't understand why he couldn't do MK and then all the things that he's doing for them without interruption. I think he could. Whether he would want to at this point, I don't really know, but I have no way of knowing. But at this point, would it surprise me if someone sent me proof that it was, hey, look, take a look at this. What do you think about that? I'd be like, oh yeah, that's not surprising. So I wonder as much as you do. Luke, we're still waiting for the full sleeve tattoo on the left arm. It's about 2 years now. And what were you planning to get? I don't know if I'm going to get one anymore. I don't know if I want tattoos anymore. I told you guys, man, dude, midlife crisis will fuck you up. It'll fuck you up proper. I have been on a journey of self to better understand who I am. And I have had to go to places and interrogating my own life to better understand that. And part of that process was just asking myself, why do I like the things that I like? And on some things, I was able to make an argument to myself that was compelling enough to keep. Tattoos is not one of them. I don't necessarily hate my tattoos. I still kind of like some of them. And maybe I'll feel differently in a year. I'm not making some like, oh, I'll never get them again. I don't feel that way necessarily either, but like I don't think of them fondly anymore. For the most part, with some exception. But honestly, I'm thinking about getting many of them removed. Not all of them. I wouldn't get all of them removed, but I'm thinking about getting several of them removed. Yeah. LT, does multiculturalism strengthen or weaken national cohesion when cultural diversity's benefits are weighed against the costs to shared identity? It strengthens them. Well, I mean, it depends on how it's done, but it strengthens them. So let me read this question one more time. Does multiculturalism strengthen or weaken national cohesion when cultural diversity's benefits are weighed against the cost to shared identity? No, it benefits them. But this is the big lesson. Sorry, one more time. This is the big lesson. I've pointed this out. John, let me, one second here. Let me see something. When you guys might know, well, I'll leave the names out of it. I was going to bring up Henry Ford, but I'll leave the names out of it. Here's what we've discovered over time. When you have immigrant populations living among you, and this could be any kind, Ukrainian, Costa Rican, Mexican, whatever. When you have that, at times, what ends up happening is the most amount of group conflict that we have seen has happened a few different times. But in some of the places where it became the worst was in situations where, let's say, this is, for example, the Germans who came over in the 19th century. This is a big one, a really big one. Not just the Germans that came over in the 19th century, but in the early part of the 20th as well. pre-World War I, let's say. One of the things that they found was that on the good side, let's say in Pennsylvania, where you can see the German influence is still visible to this day. The reason why we know that is because one of the highest places of companies in Germany that open and invest in the United States, create jobs, open factories, open companies, and invest in the United States are in places that have lingering Germanic history. Germanic populations that have, they become fully Americanized at this point, but it's from that group. And this is a common thing that you see, right? So if there's a lot of Mexican people, let's say in Southern California, you'll tend to see like where Mexican national businesses invest. It'll be in those particular communities. This is, you can see this with the Koreans in Atlanta, Georgia, or not Atlanta, but Georgia specifically, where they had that factory in that whole area. Like that's where all that money comes in. But the point I'm trying to make is what they ended up doing in parts of the 19th century and early 20th century was those German enclaves that you would see in places of Pennsylvania. A lot of folks got sick of them and they felt like they were keeping to themselves. And so what they ended up doing, they ended up mandating that they had to speak English in jobs and a variety of other ways to tamp down on German identity. And what the immigration scholarship shows is that it backfired. And because what ended up happening was it made them more insular. It made them marry within the German community as opposed to finding marriage outside of it. It made them get jobs within the German community as opposed to finding jobs outside of it. It made them go to German churches as opposed to going to churches outside of it. But what they found was that's not the way to do it. If you just say you're not allowed to be German, you're only allowed to be American, and that's the end of it, they react negatively. People cannot let go. Some people can, of course, but forced removal of national origin as an identity is a failed process. What you can do, and where they found the highest levels of assimilation, right, where it became almost no problem at all, no social friction, nothing, is when they said, okay, leave your German identity, but let's add an American layer on top. Right. So if you want to speak German in your home, that's cool. Speak whatever language you want. We're going to ask you to learn English, but we're going to incentivize you to learn English. We're not going to like ban use of German in public places, for example. Right. We're just going to say, hey, we want to make it easy for you to learn English. We're going to even pretend, there were some cases where they would pay people to learn it as a way to foster assimilation. And it worked. It worked. Not just with the Germans, but with all kinds of populations, and not just ones of European ancestry. Mexicans, Burmese, happened to a lot of different communities. The Burmese in the manufacturing sectors in the Midwest, particularly in the Wisconsin area, have had a massive success rate by doing this, right? Then you're asking about like what the benefits are to national cohesion. Well, the first thing is, how are we going to obtain cohesion? Are we going to just say you're not allowed to have an identity from where you come from? We know that just doesn't work. It backfires constantly. And the immigration scholarship to this is not ambiguous. But now we're asking ourselves, what are the benefits of having a population that pulls from immigrant communities from around the world? And the answer is fucking obvious. It is enormous, enormous benefit from this. I mean, the amount of arts that we have been benefited from, the amount of, to the extent, these are small things, but the amount of to which the culinary environment in which we live has been radically transformed by virtue of immigrant communities cannot possibly be overstated. But it goes more than that. A lot of times, and this is true when Americans go overseas, by the way, but it's true when they come here, or foreign populations, they come here. What they found is that a lot of times, even if they speak the language and they have credentials, getting into like the pipeline of how jobs are awarded in these sort of traditional senses, whether they're manufacturing or white collar, can be quite difficult. And so they end up having a much higher entrepreneurial rate relative to natives. And if you think about it, it makes sense. I did a story on a guy for UFC magazine. This is true. A Venezuelan guy. I did a story on him. When was this? 2014. And he was a Venezuelan immigrant, and he was teaching jujitsu to the guys coming home from Iraq who had blown off an arm or both legs or whatever, and they called it adaptive jiu-jitsu. And at Walter Reed, they do this for everything: adaptive archery, adaptive jiu-jitsu, adaptive swimming, like you name it, they can do the whole thing. It's really a phenomenal thing to see in person, to be perfectly honest. I felt humbled and privileged to see it. Well, what happened with that guy, right? Once that was over, what was he able to do? He opened his own jiu-jitsu school here, right? And he has a jiu-jitsu school out in town, and he married an American woman, right? Like, this is how it is done. This is how it is done. You don't tell a person you just can't be Venezuelan anymore. But what you do say is, of course, you set up some incentives to find ways to assimilate. We know what some of those things are. And then what we've noticed from immigrant populations is they are far more likely, as indicated, to be entrepreneurial. Did you know that in Silicon Valley, the firms with the highest level of immigration have the highest levels of patents and inventions? It's not an accident, because you're pulling from people in part who are going to be the guy who did CAPTCHA, right? You know, how many motorcycles do you see in this thing? That was an immigrant who came up with that. I think from Guatemala, if I'm not mistaken, who came up with that. And one thing I just want to point out is, do you guys know that song, America the Beautiful? Some people have asked to have it replace the Star Spangled Banner because it's so beautiful, right? You ever read the lyrics to America the Beautiful? Do you know who wrote that song? Irving Berlin. Do you know who Irving Berlin is? A fucking immigrant. I want you to wrap your head around the idea. Let me pull the song up. Here. Oh wait, hold on. I'm singing the wrong one. Hold on. God Bless America. Sorry, not America the Beautiful. God Bless America. Here, hold on. God, not America the Beautiful. God Bless America. Written by Irving Berlin. While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair as we raise our voices in solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. You say it twice. Guys, a fucking immigrant wrote that. I don't think that's in any way coincidental. We have been poisoned by this ludicrous idea that they are takers, by the lump of labor fallacy. It's just not true. Yes, there can be ways where if there's like this radical reintroduction to a population that has no relationship to that area, and if we tamp down on their ability to have an identity and we just force them into these situations, yes, it can create conflict, and that's bad for social cohesion. Absolutely. But what we have found is successful societies have novel ways and important ways of welcoming newcomers. Immigrants are strivers for America. They long for identity. And I know you're going to say, oh, there's this example of this one and that one. Yes, of course. Like, I can't speak for 100% of them. But like the record of success, like we are a success story because we were able to do this, making changes in the 1960s and ultimately in the 1990s. This is how we were able to have enormous success in any number of different ways. And I mentioned it before, like, you know, salsa is this thing, not the thing you eat with your chips, but like the dance, the style of music and the dance. That was invented here. It wasn't invented overseas. There were various different parts of the Latin American diaspora who met here, and then they remixed and they made something new. That's an American thing. It's a totally American thing. And it's a function of having immigrants. So yes, there can be ways where the insular nature of certain kinds of communities based on a variety of factors can create distance, and that can be a problem. But it doesn't need to be that way. And the contributions that they make to the tax base, to our entrepreneurial economy, to inventions, to patents, to burgeoning forms of technology, to even things as simple as manual labor. I would also like to point out one of the things that really speaks to me that I think is insane that no one's talking about is just how much Christian on Christian violence we are enacting by having, like, we have a completely broken immigration system that we've not updated since the 90s that doesn't match our economy's needs at all. And because of this, it creates this surplus where you have not enough of the legal immigration routes to be offered. So instead, what happens? They come over, or they not necessarily all of them come over illegally. Some of them come legally, and then the visa expires or whatever. And they live in the shadows or some version of the shadows because our immigration system has basically failed them. They can be. Did you guys see how many of the summer surge of the arrests had no criminal record at all? It was up to 70%. Like, these are God-fearing people for the most part. These are people that go to church for the most part. People that have jobs for the most part. No criminal record for the most part. And we're deciding that, oh, we can just pull out the people who lay the concrete. We can pull out the people that care for the elderly in these various healthcare centers. We can pull out these enormous contributors to tax bases, to people that they go to the movies, they buy food, they get gas, they buy cars, they get loans. We can just rip all this out, and we're just going to have a renewed sense of Americana as a consequence. It's the opposite of everything that made Americana possible to begin with. It's madness. And what's kind of funny is you can see it's not working anywhere. There's no place you can point to where like mass deportation has yielded an improved economy. It's utterly failed, and it's going to keep failing because this is what the immigration literature has showed over and over and over and over and over again. There is this hysteria that has been whipped up, and having lived through various different hysterias in the course of my life. Oh, Saddam Hussein's got weapons of mass destruction. And then you just have to see the failure of a project before people go, oh, right. We are in the process of that. Luke, Dylan Dennis said he pulls guard and taps out Islam within 2 rounds. Who gives a fuck what he says? Luke, curious what the like to dislike ratio was on your Hassan vid. While I agree with the overall point you made, Piker is not someone I personally have much sympathy or respect for. Saludos. 316. Is that the number of the I don't know what that means. It was high. I don't have it in front of me. Let's look. Oh, you know what? They don't show that much on the back end anymore. I don't know. It was pretty high. I don't think it was abnormal. Guys, like, you don't have to make a global defense of Hassan Piker. I don't even fucking know enough about Hassan Piker to make a global defense. Oh, everything he said is great or everything he said is bad. I don't know. I have no fucking idea. I don't watch his shit. Dude, his streams are like hours and hours. And there's a lot of it. I'm an unk. Like, I'm in my unk stage of life. I'm an unk. That's not unk content. You know what I mean? I'm not watching that shit. I'm not watching you meander for 4 hours, you know, on the internet. And I can't do that. I cannot do that. Somebody else can do that. So I have largely not paid attention. Like, you can have a perfectly reasonable diet of how you get your information about politics or your analysis or whatever, and it never touches that. It doesn't touch it. You can ask Othello. Like, I don't know shit about the guy. Yeah, of course I know some, obviously. Like, everybody knows a little bit at this point, and I've seen some of his videos, and you know, in general, they've seemed fine for the most part. But I don't know what I'm missing. I've been told that, like, he said some crazy shit about what was it? Russia invading Ukraine. I don't know what he said. I have no idea. What I am saying is, don't fall for the fucking game that is being played here. First of all, they're making this last frenzy about a statement that, if you actually read what he said, it is very clear there's nothing there. I don't mean like he didn't say anything. I mean, he didn't say anything offensive. He makes the argument that these other organizations who he is saying, please don't do this, they're saying, no, you cannot have Jewish identity without adherence to the state of Israel. Like, you should that's what these organizations are saying. He's saying you can be perfectly Jewish without having, you know, some kind of admiration for the state of Israel, you know, and he's arguing it is a bad idea that when the government of Israel is undertaking genocide, and they are deeply, profoundly despised and unpopular globally, it's a mistake to tie Jewish identity to them. Because A, it's just a government that's only been here less than 100 years. It's not, I mean, I know the state of, or like the biblical nation of Israel obviously dates back a long time ago, but this one, this like functioning nation state has only been here since the 40s, late 40s at that. And so his argument is, what's going to happen? There's going to be blowback if you do that. This is obvious to anyone. You should ask people, if you mean to tell me if there's a government engaging in behavior, even if they don't want to call it genocide, pick another government, some other kind of example, and they engage in the kind of thing that the rest of the world finds reprehensible, and you tie some immigrant population afar, ties their identity to that nation, which of those other people would say there won't be any unintended consequences to that long term? Nobody would say that, because of course that's a real consideration you have to make. If you tie religious identity to a nation, a government, really, let's just call it that, a government engaging in absolute worst kinds of crimes against humanity, this is going to be a problem. And we don't want anyone innocent to get hurt. The point is not, oh, well, then, when people get hurt, they deserved it. That's not the point. The point is, with blowback, it's unintended consequences. And the other part about blowback, if you actually study it, is that, oh, well, the government, a nation, does something bad to another population. So when that population seeks revenge, they'll just do it to the government. No, they'll go after vulnerable populations within that space as a, yes, as a fuck you to that government or whatever, as a rejection of their policies. But they're not going to just, oh, you know what, we can only go after the soldiers. We can only go after the infrastructure of the military. We can't. They're not going to fucking do that. Or at a bare minimum, you run the great risk of them not doing that. It's not making people safer. The whole point is to make people safer. It's not going to do that. Blowback is a concept that the CIA sort of coined in the 1950s. It's been studied extensively since then. This is something that no one would bat an eye at in any other context. And a lot of people going after Piker have made the same point. Dana Bash made the same point on CNN. Neera Tanden made the same point. And other Jews have made the exact same point that Piker made. Ezra Klein, a writer for the New York Times, made the exact same point. Hannah Arendt, famous philosopher in the middle of the 20th century, she made the exact same point, because it's fucking obvious. It's fucking obvious. Frankly, it's a little banal, to be honest. That, look, what are the long-term consequences of doing this? They are dangerous. It is who wants to endanger people for this reason? You can have a faith and an identity outside of an attachment to a foreign government. Of course you can. Of course you can. Of course you can. So what they're trying to do is very simple. Everyone's like, I don't like Hassan Piker for this reason or that reason. I don't care if you like or hate him. Your choice. But what you're not allowed to say is what he said is that Jews who suffer hate crimes bring it upon themselves. That is not what you are allowed to say, because that's not what he is saying. That's not what he is saying. That's the opposite of what he is saying. And they keep repeating this lie over and over and over. Ask yourself why they're doing that. Here's why they're doing it. Because what they think is, if we can burn this witch at the stake, we can just stop that whole movement, right? We're going to stop that dead in its tracks, because they, rightly or wrongly, they see him as like the avatar of that leftist insurgent movement that wants to rein in the abuses of Israel. They think if they burn him at the stake, they can get witchcraft to go away. That's what they think, right? Look at what they did. Hakeem Jeffries putting Jared Moskowitz on a subcommittee in the House that is going to have an enormous role on the Iran war and what war powers resolutions get passed or don't, on anything in a similar vein related to Israel. The Democratic leadership is signaling they're going to put that guy in a position of power, and especially when if the House is overtaken by the Dems in the midterms, like the Democratic leadership is clearly saying, and look at all of the ones that came out against him: Moskowitz, Rosen, John Ossoff did. I saw today as well. There's been a bunch of them that have done it, dude. They are clearly signaling, the Democratic Party leadership in this country, they are clearly signaling, we're not going to do fucking shit about Israel. Maybe they'll do something on affordability. Maybe they do something on healthcare. I don't think that they will. But What they're very clearly signaling is we're not doing fucking anything. That is what they are saying. Primary every last one of these motherfuckers. They are fucking MAGA collaborators. They are architects of American fucking ruin, is who they are. That is who they are. And they think if they can stop Piker here, the whole thing just goes away. Despite that, we know in the polling, this is an 80-20 issue for the Democratic voting base. They want Israel reined in badly. And look at what they're doing. They're lying about something Piker didn't fucking say to shut him up. We're not talking about Donald Trump starting a trade war with Canada. We're not talking about him rounding up wild horses on public lands and then selling them to overseas slaughterhouses. We're not talking about that we're taking precious metals and oil from Venezuela and doing nothing to improve the state of that country. We're not talking about any of these fucking things, right? ICE abuses, you name it. Nothing is coming up because they're so focused on Hassan Piker. They are the right. I keep trying to tell you guys, the centrist Dem party, it's to the left. To the left of fucking what? It's not a real leftist movement. It's mostly a center-right movement. Whose attacks do the centrist Dems sound like? It sounds just like what you'd see on Fox News. It's indistinguishable. They are one group. They are one group. They want to bury the left that's having an insurgent moment politically. Milat Kiros, Chevalier, Abdul Sayed, Janice Lewis George, anybody DSA or anything related to that. They want to crush that, and they want to crush any leadership that's attempting to take over that has a completely different attitude about Israel, and they want to burn Piker at the stake for this as a way to achieve it. Don't fall for it. You want to hate him because he said a different thing at a different time? Fine, hate him. Fine. No problem. What the fuck are they doing? What the fuck are they doing? They're trying to upend. Jared Moskowitz said he's to the right of J.D. Vance on the Iran war. Openly, he said this. I think it was on Fox News, if I'm not mistaken. He said it. I'm to the right of J.D. Vance on this. Do you think that they want the Iran war to come to a close? Of course they don't. Expressly, they don't. They might hem and haw about Trump's abuse of power and blah, blah, blah. You should have consulted Congress. Why? You'd still fucking approve it anyway, bitch. Look at this. Look at this. It is so fucking obvious what is happening. And it's insanely low IQ. It's not possible to call yourself reasonably intelligent, read or listen to the full thing that Piker said and be like, oh, what he's saying is Jews deserve their own hate crime. No. Absolutely not fucking at all what he is saying. They are trying to destroy the insurgency that wants to bring Israel to heel. That is clearly the game plan. Luke, who are some conservatives you have respect for? I'm trying to think of the ones I follow most normally. Patrick Ruffini is a good pollster I follow. Kristen Soltis Anderson is a good one I follow. Who's the British guy who works for National Review? I forget his name. I like him. I hate a lot of the shit he says. Sagar Enjeti I like. I hate a lot of the shit he says too, but I like a lot of them. Who are some other ones that I follow more than you might imagine. The problem is so much of the modern right is so insanely low IQ, it becomes quite difficult, right? Because then you're like, oh, National Review, that's not really representative of the modern right. And I'm like, yeah, it's not. But like those guys are literate. They got a lot of other bad ideas, but they can at least write, the verb tense that's correct in the sentence, I'm trying to think of some other ones who I read more regularly off the top of my head. I'll watch the other ones time to time just to sort of catch. I didn't used to do this. Now I do it more often. Dude, I'll watch Steven Crowder just to see where his head is at. I don't watch Candace Owens really. X constantly feeds me Nick Fuentes clips, even though I don't have much interest, but his I mean, he's obviously got fucking insane ideas, but sometimes he's able to his ability to diagnose the other elements of the right that he sees as nefarious can be pretty good at times. Although there's a lot of problems there fucking too, obviously. Anyway, yeah. The UFC has 2 mega prospects in Chanel Dyer. Mega prospects is not the right word. And Carly Judice. What do you think the ceiling is for these two? Dyer, a little bit more of a decision machine. Not always, but sometimes. Additionally, I don't think there's a 115 women who is outstriking Dyer. What about you? I think it's still a little early to declare that. Judice, to me, is the more interesting one because she's got a hammering style of striking. You know, she really just bears down on opponents. It's a little different to me. Luke, I'm Canadian and wondering why Trump keeps fucking with us. What's your read on what he wants from Canada? Is it resources turning Canada into a vassal state? One of the things that Iran experts warned was that when that thing went south, he was going to return back to the Western Hemisphere. I mean, he was doing it before the Iran war, but that he would ratchet it back up. I think he just believes in manifest destiny. He wants to be one of these presidents that can say he acquired U.S. territory during his time here, right? He wants to be there's Puerto Rico, you can't grab that. You know, Alaska, we already got. Hawaii, we already got. Guam, we already got, or, you know, basically. But like Canada would be, I think, because he's also a fucking moron, right? You have to kind of understand that. But like part of it is he just wants to be able to conquer territory, and he thinks that there are simplistic ways to get there versus what he is doing, which is setting in motion a reordering of the international space away from and around the United States rather than with it. Something feels off about the fan reaction to the Dean Thomas thing. I mean, these are people who cheered Strickland's proposition to revoke women's rights. Dean had it coming. I mean, that was a really bad thing that he did. But yeah, like in MMA, it's like, hey, Connor's back. And it's like, yeah, we probably shouldn't cheer that. Or, you know, hey, here's Strickland being like, I'm saying something crazy about the gays. And it's like, yeah, isn't that great? No, it's pretty fucking terrible. Like, you can't really judge in MMA like the righteousness of anything by the virtue of the response to it. It's impossible. It's distinct from it. You recently made a video about reading comprehension. Great video, but I argue it's an issue with listening and basically life in general these days. I don't disagree. That was the point of the video. Something had happened in my life that made me realize there was more of it in terms of like this Hassan Piker thing is a great example of it. In fact, that was the biggest one that was kind of powering it. Someone was like, are you talking about the people who consume your content? No, like you're proving my point when you say that. Like, don't say that. That's not the fucking point. The point is about the broader things I see beyond that. And frankly, the bigger problem is it's the people you interact with at work, at church, at the gym. It's everywhere. It's fucking everywhere. And no one gets it perfect. I get it wrong. Everyone gets it wrong. Like, of course. But it has now just become like this huge like fact of life that people, they hear you and they think that they hear what you're saying. And this is a common problem I see with some of my critics, where I'll see them say, hey, Luke believes, or he believes X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't believe any of that shit. But they'll tell themselves that. One of the funny things I've seen, like I saw it most potently after I posted the, it's still behind a paywall, but like I put it on Twitter, a link to my lecture that I gave at the University of Maryland in April. One of the things I saw were a bunch of people who never watched it. I saw like AI art that people made, you know, where like, oh, he wants land acknowledgements or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, they literally have to invent a fictionalized version of what happened that soothes their priors in order to have a conversation about what they think is wrong with me. That's very strange. That's very strange. It's not engaging with the material. And if there's one thing, if you want to beat someone at an argument, you have to know what their argument is forward and backward. You actually can't defeat it unless you do. And most people can't seem to do that. What should happen if Tom and Gon rematch and Gon eye pokes Tom again? It almost feels like, given the circumstances, taking 1 point isn't enough. Disqualify him. I'd be okay with that. What on earth could possibly be the justification? Take a fucking point. Disqualify him. I don't care. MK all day. Thank you, sir. Luke, I want to say thank you for your content. Your work has gotten me through my BA in history, my teaching certification, and now my new path, a cert to be a paralegal. I wish you nothing but the best, and I'm so glad that I could provide value to you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Dana's angry because Eastern champs no go bye-bye. Yeah, but Eastern champs are relatively less likely to complain about pay. Holy hell, tragedy in Nepal, the glacial collapse. Dude, those videos were so fucking bad. My thoughts and best wishes to the Nepalese people. Get on board. Global warming is here. Dude, they thought that what happened was an earthquake hit, which caused the glacier to fall and then spill out, and then you saw what happened. No. The glacier warmed, fell, and then when it hit the earth, it caused the Richter scale measurements to like light up like an earthquake was there. Holy fucking shit, dude. Dude, those videos are so bad. They are so bad. All those people you see running for their lives, they all fucking died, dude. Instantly. Like that whole edifice, like the border between Nepal and China. Do you guys see that? Remember that big, had like an opening in there, and then it had like this awning over the top. It's all gone. I tweeted it. There's a satellite image. It's all gone. That's one of the worst natural. That was the Japanese, like Patrice O'Neill has a funny bit about the Japanese tsunami where he kind of argues, he goes, I could have lived through that. I could have just hiked my pants up because the water rushed in and it kept rushing. But, you know, and it was, I don't mean to imply it wasn't devastating. Obviously what happened in Fukushima was terrible, but like you could get to the top of a tall building and live. You're not getting to the top of a tall building with that one. It's going to kill everything. Seen more discourse about defense and defense in general. It should be scored. Personally, I still feel the benefit of defense is to not be hurt and to be able to deliver offense. I don't know if the point of defense is to deliver offense. The point of defense is to minimize, eliminate, or otherwise impede their offense, which then could give you a window to your offense, but like that's not the purpose of it. Although I suppose, let me think about that. Yeah, I mean, it can be used to aid offense. I suppose, yes. I'm being a little bit too restrictive. But I think the reason defense is coming up more is because you're just noticing how much more. MMA is an offense-first sport for sure. But guys, look around in the grappling department. Defense has caught up with offense. Trump's new trade war with Canada is self-destructive, especially before the midterms. What do you think he's honestly going for here? He doesn't. Remember all these people who during Trump won and then like after the election, the Trump splainers, you know what I'm talking about? These guys being like 4D chess. See, he's going to do this, to do that, to then do this, to cause that, and then that's going to make American prosperity. Like, for example, when they initially launched the Iran war, everyone was like, you know what this is really about? It's really about harming China. Who the fuck's making that argument now? Remember that? Remember the Trump splainers trying that one? He had good political instincts in 2015, seeing the rot that was in the Republican leadership at that time, and he took a moment and it worked. He is obviously a fucking moron. There is no grand plan. He made a Fox News host the Secretary of fucking Defense. What's the great strategy? There isn't one. There isn't one. He's a moron. He will ruin everything because he is not bright. It's hard to believe it's been 25 years since 9/11. What would you use to describe the way life has changed in the quarter century since? One of the most few times in your life you can be like, the world just pivoted in a different direction after a day. But that was one of those days. The world just pivoted. Nothing was ever the same. The global war on terror changed us. It changed the Middle East. It changed the world, quite frankly. And we're still living with that. ICE, the current ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, they are a product of the global war on terror brought home. I have a whole video on this. The guy who studied the war on terror, Spencer Ackerman, has made this link explicitly. Boomerang theory, all that shit got brought home. And now we're living with it. Predictions, Van versus Pantoja. I'm going to go Van. Jan versus Merab. I'll go Jan. Peter Cullen did the Predator voice. No, you mean Optimus Prime. Optimus Prime. Valentine said he'd fight Alistair in the Strikeforce tournament. Dutch don't give a dang. Yeah, but Valentine wasn't very good relative to Alistair. Alistair was great. Valentine was not very good. But yes, the Dutch culturally are a little different with it. ULT went to see Grupo Frontera with my wife last night in Chicago. Been to many Latin shows with your wife? Some, yeah. I'm also a gringo behind the enemy lines, LOL. Yeah. Fonseca was a big one I've seen. Rip Dolly Parton. Oh, man. Can you please elaborate more on the positive impact she has had on society? I wish more celebs would act like she did. It's not just here in DC, but obviously DC is one of the programs. Her Imagination Library. When my daughter was born, every single month, they would send a book to her. It'd be addressed to her. So, like, as she got older, she'd be like, I have mail. You know, it was kind of fun for her to see it in the mail. It'd be addressed to her. And the books were not low quality, dude. They were good books. They had interesting stories, interesting characters. They were well put together. One of them was a book about, it was an illustrated book. You know that song, A Coat of Many Colors, where her mom took a bunch of old rags because she needed a coat and they couldn't afford it. So her mom sewed her a coat from all the different rags that they had, and she was so proud of it. And the kids made fun of her at school, but she didn't care because she felt like she had so much love and so much joy around her, and what it meant to her for her mom to care for her. Like, I mean, it's emotional to kind of talk about, honestly, a little bit, dude. To watch the Communist Party come out and praise Dolly Parton, and then Donald Trump to come out and praise Dolly Parton. It's like, dude, I don't know if we'll ever have someone like that again. Where like literally fucking communists and Donald Trump are like, she's the best. Who else are they going to say that about? You know, I think one of the things for me that really stands out about her is she was so filled with joy for humanity. You know, there's so many people who came out after she died. It was kind of funny. My timeline was filled with rappers being like, oh my God, Dolly Parton this and Dolly Parton that. Like, you know, Eminem, I'm sure you saw, and then Juicy J. When 3 6 Mafia beat Dolly Parton for an Oscar in the musical category, she wrote them a letter to say, you know what, I'm glad you guys won because at least somebody brought it home to Tennessee. She loved people. And she never forget where she came from. Dollywood brings in, you know, how many jobs people have, and when they have those jobs, they get tuition stipends and all kinds of other benefits, you know, in the Smoky Mountains where she grew up. And her Imagination Library has donated over 300 million books to kids worldwide, to say nothing of other individual causes that she made, to say nothing of her artistic contributions. She wrote I Will Always Love You and Jolene in the same day. You know, so a very, very exceptional talent. But the thing I always think about is I don't want to compare her to like tech CEOs, but like it was ruminating in my mind. You know, you look around and like Jeff Bezos is out there ruminating about having people in space, and, you know, Elon's out there like, we got to get to Mars. And like, look, you need dreamers. It's true. Society needs dreamers. Society needs people who have crazy ideas about the future and want to pull us in that direction. I don't think Musk is that guy, but, you know, we'll see what happens with SpaceX. And, you know, I think Bezos is full of shit, to be honest with you. But like the thing that really stands out to me is what we need is somebody who cares materially about us here, now, who can look around and recognize that like humanity needs people to care, needs people to love it. And I feel like so much of what we see from our leadership, even when they do something, because you can be like, oh, you know, SpaceX might get to Mars and it might create all these jobs and blah, blah, blah. It's true. But like all those fucking guys who want to do that, it's all for profit. It's all for personal glory. And what she did has none of that. She wasn't looking to make herself famous off the Imagination Library. She wasn't looking to make herself rich off the Imagination Library. She gave tens of, if not hundreds of, more than that. Yeah, absolutely hundreds of millions of dollars. And it was a job creator herself in a community that needed it. And it just sort of occurred to me, like, all of these other people that in society, like, oh, I'm going to like optimize and solve for these societal problems. I don't trust their motives. I think all of this is transactional for them. And I think a lot of it is just because they're self-interested. And someone like Dolly, to me, feels so different, because it seems like her joy for humanity, her love for humanity, had her focused on the problems here, had her focused on the problems in her community, had her focused on the problems that children today, right now, have with, say, literacy. It made her focus so simple yet so effective. And I just don't feel like many of our leaders, our artists, tech CEOs, anybody seems to have that focus. They have a focus of withdrawal. They have a focus of profit. They have a focus of transactionalism. They have a focus of, oh, it's aspirational in the future. Maybe something will happen. But we need help now. We need help here. And I think her love of humanity, her love of the arts, her love of people enabled her to create art that was beautiful to us, enabled her to create and engage in philanthropy that was enormously beneficial. It enabled her to see herself as an entrepreneur, but also as a way to do that, to give back to the places she came from. She never forgot the church. She never forgot the people in the Smoky Mountains. Her dad was in charge of the literacy program for the duration of his life. She was married to the same guy for over 60 fucking years. Dude, what a fucking lady, man. What a person. What a person. We need more people that care about, I just feel like in an age of AI where all they want is to just everything feels so disconnected from one another. All the rich leaders are trying to replace us or control us or surveil us. Who is trying to lift us? Who is trying to bring us joy here now? You know? I feel like Dolly understood that on such a intuitive level. And, to me, it's not an accident that all these people came out and said, I ran into her in this place and she did this for me then, because it came so fucking natural to her. You know what I mean? Like, of course, it was everybody came out of the woodwork with a story that they had about like when Dolly did this and Dolly did that. It made sense because, of course, they did. Every time she had a natural interaction with people, it would go that way. I got to move this along. Do you think the Democrats are self-sabotaging? There's no question that they are. Do you think in meetings they think voters will go along with their support of Israel? What I think they're going to try and do is pursue some kind of kitchen table issue and then think that people will just forget about Israel. That's what they think. This is why I despise this party. I've told you guys this. People are always like, oh, are you just a hardcore Dem supporter? Since when, motherfucker? Since when? Got my first paycheck today for my new job as a junior doctor. I wanted to say thank you for all the awesome content you've made over the years. You and MK have gotten me through a lot of tough moments. Love you, LT. Donk for life. Congratulations, man. Many more checks to come for you, sir, and thank you for the donation. I appreciate it. I hate Contender Series. They openly market it as brain damage being rewarded over skill and high IQ. I also believe it is officiated and even judged differently. Promotion shouldn't have control over the officiating. They don't have control over the officiating. The commission still does. But like the signal to noise ratio is poor. Like, on one time you're getting Bilal Hassan, although the competitor he had was not very good. And then you watch two guys and I'm like, oh my God, dude, these motherfuckers are not good. Hassan's views on Jews/Israel are not controversial, in my opinion, but I find it borderline craven you omit that he romanticizes terrorism and political violence. Once again, I'm omitting it because I don't fucking pay attention to him. I am merely pointing out it's not even really about Hassan Piker other than they think if they can crush him, they can crush me and everyone else who feels like, hey, our relationship to Israel is in desperate need of massive reformation. That's the problem. That's the problem. Everyone wants to be like, oh, Hassan said this and I hate him. Fucking hate him. I don't care. I don't give a shit. I'm not trying to hold on to, we have to make sure we all have positive things to say about Hassan in every single case imaginable. I'm not fighting that battle. I'm not trying to fight that battle. I don't care if that battle is won or lost by other people. They can do it. I'm talking about this. And that's not just about Hassan. Oh, it's about Hassan. We'll figure it all out, and it has no other implication. It has enormous implication for the future of what this country will be and what the Dem Party will do about it. That is why. Would you be on meds if TDS was an official diagnosis? Here's a better question. I think some of you motherfuckers need to be medicated. It's not a question. That's more of a comment. You know, I love these ones because they're kind of funny to me. You know, can you imagine trying to be the guy that argues on August 27th, 2026 that Donald Trump is good? You imagine that? You imagine that job? Can you imagine believing that? Oh, he's doing a great job. You know how fucking dumb you have to be? Like, you can be like, hey, man, I'm not going to vote for the Dems. I don't like them, blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. I mean, I'm not going to try and fight that. They can fight that battle. I'm not going to argue with you. But, like, you think Trump's good at this? Oof. Brother, you need help. LT, see Dana brag about Contender Series alum earning $11 million with no title fights? Yes. Probably Kevin Holland with 30 fights, trash numbers, $225 million over 400 contracts, less than the league minimum in the NFL. We talked about this. They're just like, oh, number big. If number big, how can be bad? You know? Why do you think Anik and White are so adamant that Kamaru is the greatest welterweight ever? GSP was 12-2 in title fights against 11 opponents. Usman 6-2. Maybe it's just recency bias against 5 unique opponents. Seems cut and dry. Maybe recency bias? I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. I mean, I would not put Anik and White together. I think White might have a different set of reasons for it, and I don't know what Anik's justification is. But yeah, to me, it's St. Pierre pretty easily. Luke, I know you don't have enough time, but Peter Hopkirk's The Great Game, The Struggle for Empire in Central Asia is a good history primer for the area. The next one in Asia I'm going to read. I was at the bookstore the other day. I'm going to get this one. That's the next one. That's the next Asia book I'm going to read, The Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins. That one's on the list. I haven't read it yet, but it's on the list. As a still relatively new football fan, I'm fascinated by the promotion relegation system in European sports as a whole. Do you like it as well? I like it in those worlds. The problem is if they did it, DC United would be relegated to like USL. But I generally think it's a better way of doing the system. In general, I think it's a better way of doing the system than the way we do it. Or at least for the way MLS does it. Luke Son enjoyed your video about the insane Hassan smears. Do you agree with Kalinsky when he suggests that these people want real harm for Hassan? Of course they do. They want to burn him at the stake. But it's not it's not just about him. It's honestly, it's barely about him. He is being the face of something that they want to crush because they think he represents, whether that's true or not, they think he represents something and they want to crush what he represents or what they think he represents. LT, happy birthday, King Donkus the First. I know you're busier than a streetwalker clapping them cheeks during Fleet Week. LTGP live chat kicking off next week. Yeah, I'll have more announcements about that soon. Stay tuned. Assuming you know this already, but Optimus Prime actor also did the Predator. Okay, then I apologize because I thought he'd just done Optimus Prime. I didn't know he'd done the Predator. I mean, the Predator doesn't really talk for the most part, but fair enough. What is the likelihood, given possible midterm outcomes, that the U.S. system splits from the two-party system to a possible four-party DSA, Dem, GOP, MAGA? None. The way the system is set up, that kind of fracturing at a massive electoral scale can't really happen. Not a member. Just want to say thanks for answering my free question about Ukraine. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more, but I just try to be honest. Like, there's some things that I pay attention to. There's others that I don't. I should pay more attention to them. I'm doing my best, you know. What are the chances Trump runs the economy into the ground? Runs it into the motherfucker. Where is it today? And allows the housing market to crash so we can afford a home. Yeah, that's about the deportations aren't going to do it, but there's enough damage to the economy that I don't know. I if we get out of here without an economic crash, I'll be surprised. And I don't mean like the next week. I mean the total term is over, if that even ends. You know. Just watched BJ Uno 2. Not his best performance, one of his worst ones, but maybe his best display of back taking. That's true. Maybe something for the Substack. You know what I'm going to do? I tweeted about, like, Rogan was saying, you know, BJ would maybe I could be getting this wrong, but he kind of, from memory, suggested BJ would beat Islam and Khabib. And I don't know that that's true because partly of modern best practices, and then partly like BJ, a little bit of a front runner. But I think BJ is talented. And then I said, but BJ to me is the most naturally talented fighter I've ever seen. And then Dave Meltzer, who I like Dave a lot, was like, he doesn't quite understand the deification of Penn. And I thought to myself, you know what? I might have to do something on this to kind of explain to people. People look at Penn's record and they're like, he's got a bunch of, even before like the losing streak at the end, but like even in the middle, like his performance is up and down. And I'm trying to explain to people, you can be an let me ask a question. If you are an inconsistent genius, are you still a genius? It depends, right? But you can see certainly there are going to be cases where that is one. And I think that's his. Do you recall what 2022 sentiment for Fetterman was like? It seems weird that a brain-damaged ogre who performatively wears hoodies actually won. But he was like an early Fetterman where he looks like a chud, but he votes like a lib, and libs love that. Libs love guys who look like chuds who are not that way. And he had that kind of energy, and that's why they liked him. I just put in a Q, but just got a news article that says 64 American academics are leaving the U.S. for Canadian universities. Yeah, brain drain. Why wouldn't they? It's under assault. There are speech codes that are under assault. They're trying to force anti-Semitism codes on campus. They're slashing research budgets and all different kinds. What we're telling our universities have been the envy of the world, and this fucking idiot administration is doing all the things possible to make them worse. Oh, let's get rid of international students. Oh, you mean the ones who pay full freight? That's, if you took them all out, that's $34 billion collectively out of higher education. What the fuck are you thinking? This is what I try to say all the time. Oh, make America great again. How can you make it great again if you have no idea what makes it great in the first place? Do you ever watch Medi on Zateo? I've subscribed to it. I barely consume it. If so, would you ever go on a show? Sure. With everything Zuffa and UFC are doing today, how do you see both sports in 10 years? My 10-year outlook is not great. It's hard to say. Again, it kind of hinges on this idea of like, is MMA has contracted. Is it still contracting? We had a strong summer. But globally, is it still contracting? Is it not? I don't know what the latest research on that shows. I need more information, but it has contracted. The question is whether that continues. To your point about head contact in youth sports, even Brett Favre has stated that tackling in football shouldn't happen until high school. Yeah, it shouldn't. It's a terrible idea. Your rant last week about the 225 million number was epic. Big number big. Delicious rock. I just can't believe they did it. It has to be dumber than shit. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to show them a big ass number and be like, it's like, what? I watched your Hassan video. It was bang on. As a Jew who has consumed plenty of his content, he is not what is portrayed. I am sickened by the Israel anti-Semitism conflation. At this point, I get it, dude, and I'm sorry that it's happening. And I hate the way it's so bad. It's so fucking bad, dude. It's so bad. Anyway, go watch my video. Favorite member of Bone Thugs and favorite song? Probably Crazy Bone. Or maybe Lazy. No. Yeah, no, Lazy or Crazy. And favorite song is going to be East 1999. First of the Month, great song. Crossroads, great song. For the Love of Money, great song. Thug Love, great song. There's a bunch of great songs. None of them compare to East 1999. Has your opinion on the outcome of a hypothetical Brady versus Gary matchup changed? I remember you and BC debating over a year ago. Gary's defense is strong. Probably, I think it's a lot closer now. Yeah, I suspect it'd be way, way closer now. Yes, so probably it has changed. Do you and BC have part or full ownership of MK? The IP, yes. Or is it owned by ATS? The channel is. Just curious because you've mentioned your contract a couple times this year and last. Yeah. The IP, yes. Would fighters and the Contender Series product be better served if it did actually serve a bit more like a league, like having multi-fights within Contender Series be normal? I just think it'd be better if it was clear that like what the value of it is, hey, you got to be great. And not just win quickly. You got to be great. You got to be like high level good. But that's not the point. And so because that's not the point, it's going to affect the product. LT, did you see Steven Jackson's comment on trans in the WNBA? I did not. I love Stack, but was really disappointed him carrying water for bullshit Fox News talking points. I was super bummed. No, I didn't see this. I'm not on. Where was it? Was it on an interview? Was it IG? I'd be curious to take a look. Is it fair for a ref to intervene when a fighter allows another fighter to stand up? They're allowed to play possum or fake a glove touch, so why can't a fighter be allowed to fake a stand? Wait, what? Fake a stand-up? If the because the referee intervenes to make sure that like the process goes orderly, like yeah, you could fake a stand-up, but you can't wait long enough. Like the referee will stand far apart, but once they intervene, it's to reorder the fight, and at that point, it doesn't. You can't do it. But if you can convince them before the ref intervenes, you can get away with it. How do you feel the new generation of MMA fighters would fare against the early 2000s, Hendo, Aldo? Again, the modern best practices are going to be good enough that they're going to beat a lot of those guys. But I think the athletic pedigree and the dynamism of MMA at that time, if those guys were around today learning the best practices, how would it go? I think that's a more interesting question. National cohesion question screams dog whistle, always, but you have to give an answer to them. Orville, thank you so much. Luke, MMA is so hilariously depressing these days. How the fuck are we meant to get any joy from watching it? Okay, it's a little strong. Also, Chris Barnett joining Power Slap. That sucks. Yeah, we're going to talk about that on MK tomorrow. How are we supposed to get joy from watching it, brother? If you're not, then don't. That's kind of the rule. Are there any fighters that are publicly progressive? Publicly? No. I read that Crow Cop was very liberal. Is that true? I haven't looked into Crow Cop's particular brand of politics, but no, publicly. I mean, Kevin Lee was maybe with a Bernie bro for a little while, but why would you? Dude, if you do what I do, look what happened to me. They'll just fucking heap scorn on you, and then tell you it's not a right wing sport, and then eventually they will say, okay, of course it's a right wing sport, you fucking lib, and it's like, well, why did you argue with me for about a year that it wasn't? It's not a battle you can win. LT, what's your best guess as to why top 10 guys only fight 1 to 2 times per year now? Because the UFC wants it that way? Could it really be that they really want to make sure they win because of the pay gap for champs versus non-champs? Of course. They want to keep pay contained at the high end. Sure. Of course. If the UFC wanted him to compete 3 or 4 times a year, you don't think that would happen? Is it fair for... We did this one already. Apodaca had the worst fight stance I've ever seen. I was not impressed by, the overall resume, but her takedown defense was her mentality was great too. 2 donations for me, Luke, because I'm dumb. Would you say there were any differences dating your wife compared to Western women? Well, if you're from Colombia, that's to an extent the West. I'm seeing one in Australia, and the joke is she just wants a green card. Yeah, there's some differences. I mean, my wife had legal status the whole time, so that there was no issue there. But yes, there are differences. There's a lot of differences. There's differences in dress. There's differences in relationship expectations. There's differences in, any number of different things. Yeah, of course, there can be great differences, but obviously, my anniversary is next month. It'll be 14 years. And I've been with her, right? Because we got married in 2012, right? So I've been married 14 and 3. I've been with her almost 17 years. Great vid on McAfee. Why don't you call out Rogan? I've called out Rogan a million times, who helped usher in the apocalypse. You seem to treat Rogan with kid gloves. Dog, what the fuck are you talking about? I appreciate the support. You're so wrong. You're so wrong. I've got a fucking video up. Hold on. My God, are you crazy? Here. Here, look at this. This was 9 days ago. Oops, hold on. 9 days ago. Dog, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? It's just, I don't get it. Did you talk about Ruffalo and Paramount? No. They're trying to smear him too, but now they're all focused on Hassan Piker as a consequence. That one went away because the Hassan thing kind of wrapped it all up. I disagree with a lot of your takes, but I sincerely believe you have a good heart and are a very decent man. I agree entirely with your views on Israel. Hey, man, we don't have to agree on everything. I appreciate this. I appreciate the donation, and I appreciate the kind sentiment. And may we continue to disagree fairly with one another. Luke, what's your metal origin story? How did you get into bands like Whitechapel? I'm not really into them anymore. Grew up in an era of Pearl Jam and the grunge rock thing. And then I discovered Metallica late because no one in my family ever listened to anything like that. And then the first time I heard them, it was like, holy fucking shit, what is this? And then that leads down a rabbit hole. And I've told you guys the story. And then the real one, I think that really solidified it was the Pantera Vulgar Display of Power album. And after that, I was like, what the fuck? You know, that completely, I didn't discover it till much later. And that just set me on a path. Look, I have always agreed that Lawler versus Condit was better than Lawler versus Rory. Why do you think the Rory fight is talked about more? Because it was more cinematic, right? The face-offs, the you know, the look on the face of McDonald. It had more cinema. It had more drama. But fight for fight, the Condit versus Lawler one is the most insane thing maybe I've ever seen. I watched Islam Gary again. Islam cheated again right before he landed the head kick. He stuck his fingers in Ian's glove when they were in the clinch. I'll go back and look. I haven't heard Ian say that, but I'll go back and look. What's up, Luke from Canada? Love the content, MMA political. I'm 28, going into a new career from being a cook to plumbing. Any advice for becoming a plumber? How the fuck would I know, brother? Thank you for your content, dude. It's like anything else. Just you'll be fine. I wish I had better advice. I have no idea. LT, does Murray's the bell curve overstate innate intelligence and inequality or underestimate the power of environment and institutions? Have you ever read any of the challenges to the bell curve? You should read them. He gets a shit ton wrong. Have you ever seen Craig's recent shorts in Mexico? That guy needs a TV show. Hilarious. I've seen some. They're funny. I talked to Craig on occasion. I think I talked to him last week. Luke, any big Halloween events in DC or around the neck of the woods that you're looking forward to? Halloween is goated in my book. There's a million different neighborhood like events before Halloween itself. The National Zoo has like a Zoo Lights thing, and now they're going to have like an adults only, like a zoo night as well. But dude, my area of DC is so good for Halloween. I'm not kidding when I say this. We get hundreds of kids, hundreds. It's we had our in-laws from Columbia who were up last Halloween, and they couldn't believe it. They were gobsmacked. It is absolutely one of my favorite. It's not really a holiday per se, but you know, events of the year. Luke, top 5 80-year-olds you'd like to see the Grim Reaper take next. There's one I can think of. With all these recent high-profile deaths, it makes me think of legacy. Is this something you think about often? Never. We're all fucking dust in the wind, brother. We're all going to be forgotten. Me too. I'm only trying to make a better world for the time I live in it. I will not be remembered the instant I fucking die. I have no pretensions about it. I don't care about it. I'll have this huge library on YouTube that people will go back and watch. No, they won't. No, they won't. They're not going to do. I'm not Albert Einstein. I'm not Euler. I'm not Isaac Newton. I'm not Martin Luther King. I'm not Napoleon. I'm not one of these great figures of history. I'm just a fucking guy. And when my time comes, that will be my time on earth. I don't think about it at all. Would you expect Michael Venom Page to sign with MVP MMA after he finishes his UFC contract? Probably. They might use him better. Could he be a viral star again? Well, the problem is he's a little older. Would you want to see him matched up against? Do the Coker method. I mean, I have a lot of criticisms of Scott Coker. In part, I don't think he's very good at his job. But the biggest one is that I do think that in general, he got how to do MVP right. Like how to promote that guy. Give him fights he can win. Like a guy who's going to strike with him, you know? Listening to Sam Harris, I know you hate Zionists, say that if you give Americans the choice between communist and fascist, that Americans will pick fascist. This is something I've believed. Thoughts? Yes. There is just an enormous amount of red baiting, red scaring historically built into the last 100 years of this country. That, yes, there's been a lot of anti-fascist ideas in terms of like rejection of the Nazis, rejection of the Nazi regime in Hitler or in Germany, but like in general, there's been an incessant kind of, communism lived on, Nazism didn't in like various world governments, but Nazism as a world government phenomenon did not. And so there's just been so much more. And then, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, like it's on our doorstep where we've had these like anti-communist confrontations. So yeah, for sure. What is your opinion on dog owners that break up and try to co-parent? Girlfriend and I of 6 years broke up and we got a puppy 4 years ago and raised her. I have no clue. I'd say whatever's best for the dog. I'm sure if you can come to an amicable arrangement, it's probably fine, Did you see any benefits to having countdowns in MMA like in boxing? Could it lead to more bad stoppages and less extra? Yeah, I don't. The whole point of MMA is to not do it that way. It's to make it like, oh, what happens when you get rocked? Not, oh, well, let's take a break and let's see if they can figure it out. Now. It's now. It's the immediacy of now. Usman said he turned down $2 million from PFL, Usman Nurmagomedov. I believe it. I believe that he got a $2 million offer, and I believe he may have turned it down. Sure. I think he's probably going to go to UFC at this point. I'm nearing 40, and I can feel how much my attention span has dwindled. I always have to be looking at multiple things. Tips to fix. That's not from being 40. That's from living in an attention economy that's designed to make you look at their shit. It's from having social media apps that are like that function like a slot machine, and from everything being instant now, connect, touch, notifications. You have to break that. It's not from being 40. All right, I got to get out of here because I got other stuff I got to do. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Go check out Perfect Gene. MK tomorrow, it's going to be with Jed Mashu. Should be a lot of fun. I appreciate all of you, all the donations, all the members, and all the people who just hung out, all the questions on the post section. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. I'll be back next week, and until then, stay frosty. Bye.